Hello and welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. Today's film review / commentary is going to be about the film To All the Boys I've Loved Before. It was released in 2018, if you can believe it, with a runtime of 1 hour and 39 minutes, and the director of the film is Susan Johnson. Please note that this film was created as sort of a Netflix original back in the day. Okay, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but as I saw that the release date was 2018, it was a little bit ago. And please note that this is a series, so not only is it an adaptation, I believe, off of several books, but it also has several other parts. Today we're only talking about the first film. But if you are interested after listening to my review and you want to watch the film, or you want to watch it again because you've already watched it, don't forget that there are 2 other parts of To All the Boys I've Loved Before, probably with slightly different titles. And then there's I believe, an extended version of that for EXO Kitty the little sister, that we'll talk about a little bit in this review. So, just so you know. I can't promise that I'm going to talk about the other ones. In fact, I will not promise that. Alright. So, as a summary for this film, Lara Jean is our main character. She is a teenager. I believe she's like 16 throughout the first film. And she is the middle child. She has a younger sister named Kitty and an older sister named Margot. And they have a single father who's like a doctor of sorts. And he basically lost his wife at some point when the girls were younger. And the Covey family, that's their last name, they are part Korean, part Caucasian or white Caucasian. And their dad seems to be such a really good sort of role model. He clearly loves his daughters. He makes Korean food even though he's terrible at cooking because he wants to make sure that his daughters are still connected to their mother and their culture. And you'll see also in later films that there is clearly an effort to keep the girls connected to who their mother was and the culture and how that shapes who they are and how their relationship with their father really thrives. And he doesn't seem like a stern disciplinary, but it does seem like obviously when he has to be that version of himself, he is, but it's more of a lighthearted thing. So it does seem like the family is really open and honest for the most part with each other, especially the sisters and the sibling relationship. Lara Jean seems to be sort of the quiet, shy, smart type, kind of a loner, but she kind of gets out of her shell when she starts fake dating Peter Lewinsky, which we'll get into. And Kitty seems to be the extroverted, fun, playful youngest child, who of course is the youngest child. You know, the responsibilities in your level of siblingship really shows who you are and who you'll probably become. Okay, as an oldest child myself, I connected with Margot as she was leaving for college and through basically most of this film, except for when she came back whenever her college was on vacation. And not only was she leaving for college, but she wasn't going to be anywhere near them. She was in Scotland, having a whole new life, basically. And the sort of trials and tribulations of that. And of course, now with the new modern age, you can FaceTime and things like that. Or you can send letters, which Lara Jean loves to do, except she doesn't really like to send them. Again, we'll get into that. And I just think it's lovely. I think that the sibling relationship is really a huge foundation of why this rom-com works. And it's relatable for me personally as an oldest child, but I feel like Lara Jean's middle child perspective really is clear and lovable and understandable and relatable. So the plot of the story outside of this home and these characters and the Coveys is that Lara Jean writes these letters basically putting her feelings into something that she can kind of lock away and put aside and maybe look at later just to reminisce, which is what letters are for her. She doesn't actually intend to send them, but she did put addresses on them and she did, I think, put postage on them, or to some extent it seemed like she was ready to mail them out. But she had no intention of doing that. She keeps them in this like beautifully wrapped sort of green or teal box that I love. Okay, can I just say, I'm going to get back to the plot, I promise. But the color palette and the cinematography and the lighting in the film is so beautiful. I love the pops of yellows and blues and greens. And maybe if you do decide to go watch this film, or you've seen it before and you really weren't focused on that, just really look at that. The color palette is so fucking beautiful. And also, I'm obsessed with shades of green and blue, so I just really, really enjoyed seeing that. So, okay, back to the letters. Sorry, my tangents are wild today. So, Lara Jean is that type of person, you know, she wants to put her feelings somewhere and put it away, and she has like 5 crushes, so she had like 5 letters. And let me make sure I get this right, because I cannot remember their names right now. Okay, so there were 5 boys she made letters for. It's Lucas, who we find out later in this film that he's gay, so like that's not gonna work, right? But he's super nice. He becomes sort of like her other best friend, because she has a best friend named Chrissy, who's sort of spunky and fun and extroverted, sort of like the salt and pepper, the PB&J of Lara Jean. Like that's kind of how their friendship works. And then there's Lucas, who sort of blossoms into a friendship with Lara Jean and Lucas. He's funny, he's kind, and a lot of these guys really took these letters pretty well. I feel like a lot of guys would be kind of douchebags about this and would mock her to no end in real life. Okay, so there's Lucas, who's gay. That didn't really work out. That letter was sent by no other than Kitty Covey. Catherine Covey, Kitty, if she likes you. And she's the one who sent out the letters behind Lara Jean's back. And Lara Jean finds out that the letters are sent out, which is the plot of the film. And she obviously did not consent to that. And she has these random boys who were her past crushes coming up to her, being like, hey, I got this letter. How fucking awkward is that and embarrassing? Oh my gosh. And just so you know, some of these letters and these crushes were like from middle school, so they were probably extra cringe in a time where she was cringe, right? I have no words, but that's basically the plot, and that's how she builds a friendship with Lucas. And then another letter goes to Josh, which is extra awkward. Josh is the ex-boyfriend of Margot, her older sister, who breaks up with him. That's how he becomes the ex-boyfriend in this film, before she goes to college, because it just wasn't going to work. And he's really beaten up about that. On top of that, he's their next door neighbor, and she has been really good friends with him since they were younger. She actually had a crush on him before Margot dated him, but she didn't really ever have any intention of actually dating him. But that obviously was something that was a little more deep than the situation with Lucas. And that doesn't work out either. For obvious reasons, but they have a lot of back and forth and bickering in the film, and Josh doesn't agree with the eventual relationship that he starts to see Lara Jean having with Peter, because he thinks Peter's a douchebag athlete, and that's a whole separate issue. But either way, just so you know, viewers, audience, it does not work out with Josh. Okay. It does in a way that I do feel like they're able to get back to the friendship that they had and the trustworthiness that they had, but it does not happen as smoothly as I'm saying it. And also, this puts a rift between Lara Jean and Margot in the film, because that's her ex-boyfriend, and there's some things about that even Margot didn't know, that Lara Jean had a crush or whatever. And obviously Margot's away, so when she's trying to call her little sister Lara Jean is ignoring her because she's afraid she'll tell her, and she's afraid it'll mess up their relationship. So there's a lot of deep stuff happening with that letter. Kitty really kind of fucked up on that letter. Okay, sending that letter out. And then the other guy is Peter, and then there's like a few other letters that come up in other films that are not this film. But just to know that all the letters got sent out, and the main guys we're really talking about are Josh, the ex-boyfriend of Margot, next door neighbor, Lucas, who becomes one of her best friends, but he's gay, so that's not going to work. Josh, it doesn't work for obvious reasons with a lot of context. And then there's Peter, and Peter is also the boyfriend of Lara Jean's ex-best friend, Jen, and her current best friend's name is Chrissy or Christine. I think they call her Chrissy. And Chrissy and Jen are cousins, but they don't really get along. They're very different. And Peter is currently or was dating Jen, but they recently broke up because Jen broke up with him because she's dating some new guy. But she still, you'll see in the film, doesn't want him to move on, but she thinks it's okay for her to move on. And I think she's extra upset about it, him moving on, which makes no sense because you broke up with him, girl. Anyway, she's annoying. I think she's extra annoyed about it because he starts fake dating Lara Jean, which obviously nobody really knows except for a little later. And then the people that do know is probably just like Chrissy and Kitty and whatever. So I think what's lovely and what again makes the film is the relationship between Lara Jean and Peter and the sort of unlikeliness of it happening and the oddballness of them falling for each other. So I wouldn't say enemies to lovers because I don't think they like hated each other. I think they just kind of knew of each other. She had a crush on him in the past. He's the ex of her ex best friend, so there's tension there. But I don't know that he did anything but was kind of like her jock boyfriend, Jin's jock boyfriend. And so he goes up to Lara Jean. He's like, hey, I got this letter from you. Lara Jean passes out, which I've got a story about passing out, okay? Passing out, super scary. You could hit your head on the way down. It's just like a sudden thing. Everything goes black. And how embarrassing for Lara Jean. Totally an understandable reaction if you're in shock. I might have been in shock too, right? If that happened to me. But passing out has happened to me. In fact, I've passed out in front of, what was it, a basketball team, a football team? Anyway, I passed out in a cafe setting in college, and there were athletes coming into the cafe as I passed out. And I had several people for months asking me about what happened when I passed out, or am I okay? I can't make this shit up. That was literally the worst time ever that I could have passed out, and then also have been escorted to an EMT truck and taken to the hospital. I do not recommend. But I'm just saying, as soon as I saw that scene, I was like, oh my god, flashbacks, traumatic flashbacks. Okay, back to Lara Jean and Peter. So she gets up from passing out, and instead of speaking to Peter, and then later I think Josh pops up for some reason. I don't know why, he's always there. But she kisses Peter, kind of to not talk about what's happening and to kiss him, which is like not the right decision, and then runs off. And then that's it. Okay, and obviously that spirals the whole thing. And then later, Peter's like, hey, I tried to talk to you about this, and you kissed me, which made it more complicated. So now we're going to talk about it now. And she basically tells Peter what happened, or that she didn't even know what happened at the time. I think later she found out that Kitty's the one who sent it, much later. And they decide to have a fake relationship because Peter wants to make Jen, his ex-girlfriend, jealous. And at that time, he wanted to be with her still, but obviously he wanted to make her work for it. And Lara Jean's like, okay, yeah, sure. Why not? Cool. I don't like Jen either. And ultimately, they have like a mutual understanding of that. And Lara Jean even says, like, she likes relationships in books or when she's writing, but in the real world, it's really scary, it's very vulnerable, and it's not as easy or fun, which I totally get. And I just want to note that there were several moments where I was like, oh my god, these kids have taste. For one, there's a John Hughes mention, and it's specifically about the film 16 Candles, which I have issues with. So if I haven't spoken about that before, I really do love a lot of John Hughes films, but 16 Candles is very problematic. And I love that Lara Jean talks about it, and then they also talk about how fucked up parts of the film are and create that as dialogue and conversation in the film. I just think that's fucking great. The kids are gonna be okay. Good taste. Okay, and then there's a Fight Club mention. Okay, another really good film. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. These kids have great taste. Okay, I just had to mention it because I thought it was great. And then we go on this whole little adventure of them being in a fake relationship until eventually they start to have feelings for each other. They're making out in hot tubs. They're making each other jealous even though they're not in a real relationship. They make up and then they break up because of miscommunication. It's all very entertaining and wrapped into a very beautiful cinematic and well-designed set. And it's fun, and I like the romance, and it feels like YA. It feels like YA done right. And I feel like the ending was good, and I'm still happy that they made sequels because the other films are also very good, and it just glides into one another very easily while still seeing the little bit of growth. Not just like with age, you see the characters grow a little bit, but you see their character development within these relationships, specifically the one with Peter and Lara Jean. I think the only last note about the film that I liked, I did love that sometimes when Lara Jean or someone was texting, you could see the text on the screen. I love that sometimes Lara Jean had her dream states or her fantasy in her mind states of the boys in her room or in certain settings that weren't them actually interacting with her, but it was sort of like her idea of how they would react to her. They weren't really there. I thought that was great. And I think that it just felt good. It just felt so lighthearted, and it was a positive film and realistic as well. So now I'm going to go into my quote segment, and I hope that you overall enjoy the film when you go watch it, if you do. Okay, Lara Jean. So, love in dating. I love to read about it, and it's fun to write about and to think about in my head, but when it's real, Peter, what, it's scary? Lara Jean. Yeah. Peter. Why? Why is that scary? Lara Jean. Because the more people you let into your life, the more that can just walk right out. Peter. There's no one like you, Cubby. Lara Jean. Being with Peter was so easy that sometimes I let myself pretend that it wasn't fake. Okay. Bye.